Hey, happy October. So you know those Annabelle movies? The ones about that demon-possessed ugly doll? Do you know that's actually supposedly based on a true story? Now, I'm not going to get into whether or not it's true, but it's an interesting topic. The actual Annabelle doll really isn't that scary looking doll that you see on movie posters and in that movie. She's actually simply a Raggedy Ann doll. And my best friend, not being that bright, decided that he wanted to have a replica of that doll and of her enclosure in his house. So he asked me to build one. Not only did I think it would be a fun project, but I thought it would be a great video to bring you this Halloween season. So let's dig right in and check it out. To begin with, we're going to start with some wood prep. So we're going to go to the miter saw and cut down some of the 2x4s for the frame. Now, because of the fact that we're making a smaller version of this Annabelle enclosure, I'm ripping those 2x4s down to 1 inch by 1 inch. And I'm going to use pocket holes to hold this enclosure together. For the main part of the outside veneer, I'm really just using fence pickets. They're cheap, they're very inexpensive, very easy to use, and they're a little bit rugged and rough, even after they're sanded, which is kind of the look that we're going for with this Annabelle enclosure. I'm going to give the floor a rough sanding, but I'm going to keep it a little bit more rough than the rest of it. And next comes assembling the face frame. The face needs to look really good because that's what everybody's going to see. And now I'm going to cut my fence pickets down in half because of the fact, again, that it is a smaller version of this Annabelle enclosure. I want those slats to pretty much be identical to what it looks like on the full-size version. Next, let's run our fence pickets through our planer. They're not going to be 100% flat, but I do want to clean them up and make sure they're consistently the same thickness. Then we move over to the table saw and trim everything down to the proper size, and we're almost ready for assembly. All right, so let's go ahead and put these slats on here. And I'm just using my Craftsman brad nailer. Now you'll notice that the tops don't line up 100%. Not a big deal because they're going to be covered by the roof. The bottom, however, does line up perfectly. Now let's go ahead and start creating the pitch of the roof. I'm just going to use a little bit of glue and a 45 degrees. And now I'm going to use my 90-degree clamps to hold everything together so I can get it as square as I can. We'll repeat that process for both of them, but I won't show you. And now let's screw them into place. This is actually more of a construction project than it is a woodworking project, now that I think about it, because I technically am building a house. All right, so these 2x4s are going to serve as the brace for the roof pickets, so I can glue and brad nail them into place. All right, there's the real Annabelle enclosure for reference. Next is to miter the roof pickets so I can get that nice clean point on top of the roof. Hey, if you're enjoying this content, don't forget, hit that subscribe button down below, hit the notification bell, leave a comment, leave a like, because those metrics tell YouTube that this is valuable content, and it doesn't cost you a thing, but it supports this channel. Now, don't forget that all the tools and descriptions are going to be linked down in the description if you'd like to check any of those out. And now we'll glue everything in place and use some brad nails to hold it tight. All right, once we have everything glued on, let's give it a quick little sanding to even up those imperfections, because half the time I don't know what I'm doing. And now it's time to go ahead and finish up the front. Now the front actually has these 45-degree angles, so I'm cutting those on the miter saw, and then we will attach those to the face of the enclosure. And I'm going to use a liberal amount of glue. And now we simply attach each one. So I put one in place and then eyeball the next one and measure it to see exactly where it needs to be cut, so they all line up as perfectly as I can make them. And with all of our slats in place, it's starting to come together. Not bad if I say so myself. Put a little bit of trim inside there on both sides, even though you don't see the other side. And now we're ready to make the door. This is a piece of plexiglass that we got off of Amazon, and we see that it's about 0.21 inches. So I'm actually going to cut a little ridge inside of the door slats, even though I don't actually film that. Cut everything down with the table saw. First time I'd ever tried to cut acrylic on a table saw, and it worked just fine. And once we have those pieces together, it's time for assembly, and then we're going to let that dry. Now you do notice that I do have an imperfection right there. Those that dado or rabbit, I always get them confused, ended up leaving a gap that I'll have to fix later on, but there's an easy fix for that I'll show you here in just a moment. So let's clamp everything down and let it dry. And now it's time to make the cross. Now, since I don't have a dado stack, I'm just making them individually on my table saw. And it turns out fine. Now let's go ahead and assemble it together. A little bit of glue. Now, there's the imperfection that I talked about. I'm just simply going to use some edge banding on the top and bottom of these doors, and then use that edge banding trimmer to clean it off, and you'd never know that there was a gap right there. Now it's time for stain. We want this to look rustic, and thankfully the original Annabelle enclosure is not the perfect picture of woodworking, and if I'm trying to replicate it, it's going to be a little bit muddled and a little bit off, so I'm very good at that. Now, once we stain everything up, we're going to leave it to dry overnight, and I'll use just a little paintbrush to get inside those gaps to find any areas that I wasn't able to finish. Now, let's go ahead and attach the cross. I'm going to use wood glue, some Tight Bond, and then also a little CA glue so I can get it to stick pretty much instantly. And after just a few seconds, it's good to go. Now I'm going to use some playing cards to make sure that I have the gaps in the door exactly the way that I want them. Now, the hardware was hard to find because of the fact that we wanted to find stuff that looked as similar to the Annabelle hardware that we could find, but was on a smaller scale. So that was a bit of a challenge. But my friend was able to actually find this, and they turned out looking really nice. Now I'm going to use my Forstner bit to put a hole in the back so they can mount a lamp in place on the inside. And now the moment of truth. Let's put little Annabelle in there. See what it looks like. Not bad. It's pretty good scale. This is a replica of the sign that's positioned inside the actual doll. And there she is staring ominously at us. Now, all that's left is to attach the handle and the card that supposedly is some type of protection. So I hope you enjoyed this. Again, don't forget, hit that subscribe button down below, leave a like, leave a comment, share it out, turn on notifications, buy me a beer, and let's have a great time in the wood shop.